Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views on News. I'm Umar Khalid Butt. And today we're going to talk about a very important topic. Why do I call it important? Because apart from what is happening in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, this is the second most important global phenomenon that has been happening without any resolution to this conflict since the last few decades. I'm talking of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that dates even to the 19th century. It dates back, in fact, to the partition, the Plan 181, which is also known as the Partition Plan, 1948, and so on and so forth, and how Israel slowly and steadily incurs their way into Palestinian territories and then claim them as their own. And then the Palestinians were relegated to one side of their former area. The land that they used to call their own was no longer their own. They only had access to a part of that. And then came the human rights abuses. Then came all the operations that the Israelis perpetrated on the Palestinians, the countless amounts of women, children, men who were murdered, who were tortured. And one of these operations is known as Operation Protective Edge, that was launched in the summer of 2014 with the stated aim of stopping rocket fire into the country by the militants of the Islamic movement, Hamas, of course, because there was a reaction from the Palestinian authorities as well. Now, the International Criminal Court has opened a formal investigation into this very incident now after years, and as you can see on the cards related to that, the International Criminal Court has opened a formal investigation of the alleged war crimes in the Israeli-held Palestinian territories. Palestinian authorities have hailed the decision by the ICC Chief Prosecutor Fatou Bensouda as an urgent and necessary probe into the situation into the blockaded Gaza Strip along with the Israeli-occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem since June of 2014. Also, the decision to open an investigation followed a painstaking preliminary examination that was undertaken by her office that lasted close to 5 years. That was said by the Chief Prosecutor Fatou Bensouda, and you can see her picture as well on your screens. Also, from the US Department spokesperson Ned Price comes the statement that we will continue to uphold our strong commitment to Israel and its security, including by opposing actions that seek to target Israel unfairly. The ICC has no jurisdiction over this matter. The Palestinian Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki says that the crimes committed by the leaders of the Israeli occupation against the Palestinian people, which are ongoing, systematic and widespread, make this investigation necessary and urgent. Also, he said that the crimes committed by the leaders of the Israeli occupation against these forces, of course, this was a card that we had shown you before, but more than 400 European parliamentarians have also urged leaders to use Joe Biden's new presidency as an opportunity to stop what they term Israel's de facto annexation of the occupied West Bank. A lot of developments are occurring as far as the Middle East is concerned, but let's concentrate ourselves on the Israelo-Palestinian conflict to talk more about this in more detail and, of course, trying to understand how these latest developments are going to change the scenario of the Middle East, especially of Israel and of the relationship between Palestine and Israel and the relationship between Israel and the other nations. We've been joined in the studio by Javed Siddique Saab. He's a senior journalist. Thank you very much, Javed Saab, to have joined us. And on Skype, we've been joined by two guests. Our first guest is Ali Sarwan Naqvi Saab. He's a former ambassador. Thank you very much, Ali Sarwan Naqvi Saab, to have joined us. Our second guest will be Dr. Aqib Malik. He's an expert on foreign affairs. Let's begin with you, Javed Siddique Saab. Javed Siddique Saab, I just touched upon a little bit of this Israelo-Palestinian conflict and, of course, the whole backdrop of it. And we can go on and on. We can talk for hours just on the backdrop of this whole conflict. I would like to concentrate this time on the decision that has been taken by the International Criminal Court about the Operations Protective Edge, the 2014 operation in which more than 2,000 Palestinian women and children were killed by the Israelis. And now the court says that it's going to open a proper investigation into this. Is this going to have any effect whatsoever on international politics, especially with regards to the Middle East?
I don't think so. You know, in the past, the Israelis unleashed a reign of terror on the Palestinian innocent people, men, women, and children. And we also remember the world remembers very clearly the Sabra and Shatila massacres in 80s, and subsequently, the Palestinians were butchered, murdered, subjected to indiscriminate bombing, children being maimed and killed, women being killed and arrested and put in jails for years and years without trial. So there is a long story of atrocities and human rights violations on the part of Israel to the Palestinian people. The Palestinians have suffered for the last 70 years. The United Nations has promised to them that they'll be given their own homeland. And subsequently, there were so many initiatives, diplomatic initiatives, taken and supported by the Western countries, even the United States of America, the greatest supporter of Israel, that a two-state solution to the Palestinian issue was found, and an agreement was made between Palestinians and Israel. But the Israelis, particularly the right-wing extremist Israeli governments, went back on these agreements. They never carried them out. So the Palestinians are suffering from today. The Gaza Strip, which has been encircled by Israel, and even the water, the medicines, the food is not available to them. And there's a long story, a long history, and it's a very sad tale.
But this long history, this long story, these countless murders, these countless massacres and human rights abuses, I mean, we can only talk of two important places, that is Palestine and Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. But of course, this show is about Palestine. But I mean, what I'm trying to understand is that just like Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, don't they take precedence from exactly how the people of Palestine are also suffering, and how the world is also turning a blind eye on them? Aren't there a lot of similarities between the two, and aren't there vested interests behind all of that?
Yes, I think there's a remarkable identity between the issue of Palestine and Kashmir. Both these issues, both these problems were taken to the United Nations Security Council. The resolution exists, which actually call for plebiscite and giving the rights of self-determination to Kashmiris as well as Palestinians. Unfortunately, these commitments made by the United Nations have not been carried out. The world, as we have said, have turned blind eye to it, and specifically the big powers, the United States of America, which is the greatest supporter of Israel and the patron of Israel. And even today's Biden administration, in very first statement, said that we will support the security and protect the security of Israel.
But that is, I think, is more of a policy statement. That has been the policy of the United States since day one.
Throughout. So, with such robust support from the Western countries, from other countries, they have emboldened Israelis to carry out atrocities against the innocent Palestinians. They have been subjected to torture, and they have been subjected to murder, bombing. And not only that, the Israelis have actually enlarged this war into the neighborhoods. Syria is being attacked, and again, Lebanon.
Exactly.
So, and the illegal settlements, despite warning from the United Nations and the warning from the European Union, plus some of the politicians in the United States have opposed the settlements and the creation of these settlements, but Israelis continue with illegal settlements in the Palestinian
Javed, let's
areas.
talk a little bit about the International Criminal Court. As far as the statements that have emanated from Ned Price, also from the Israeli foreign minister, they seem to put the value of the ICC on one side. Really, do you feel that the ICC does not retain the value that it is supposed to have?
See, when it comes to the interest of Israel or the supporters of Israel, particularly the US and the Western countries, they give value to ICC and they give it importance. But when they are these countries themselves are in the dock, and they are being to be, they are to be examined, and they are to be questioned, and their conduct is to be examined and scrutinized. They turn against the ICC, and they say they have it has no jurisdiction into this matter. So this is really hypocrisy. This is duplicity. This is only self-serving. When it comes to your interest, ICC is very important. It's an international entity.
Exactly.
It is very important. But when it comes to the question of Palestine, or when it comes to question of Kashmir or other areas, conflict areas, they say that it has no jurisdiction, it has no value, and as the Israelis have said, that they do not recognize the ICC as a genuine entity to look into this
Are
matter.
the powers that be, Javed Sahib, in your eminent point of view, afraid that if the ICC formally starts proceedings and sets up a decision that the countries need to follow, that it will set a precedence that will be very difficult not to follow by other powers? And I'm also talking in context with Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Tomorrow, Pakistan can go to the ICC and also say, you've handled the Palestinian issue, now handle the Kashmir issue.
Of course, a precedent will be created, and the people of Kashmir might, and will certainly rise and say that this atrocity is being committed by the Indian armed forces illegally occupying Kashmir, are subjecting them to torture and subjecting them to tremendous human rights violations. So their case must be heard, and the ICC must intervene to stop this inhuman treatment by the Indian forces. But they are afraid of it. The Indians plus other countries are afraid of it. Tomorrow, again, ICC can probe the atrocities committed by any other major power of
and that
the
is
world.
what a lot of countries are afraid of, basically.
So they don't want to ICC to intervene in their matters and expose their misdeeds. So therefore, they are scared of it.
Speaking of exposure, I'd like to quote unquote tell you something about what Benjamin Netanyahu said in a video that was posted on Twitter following this ICC decision. He said, the state of Israel is under attack this evening. The international court based in The Hague has reached a decision which is the essence of anti-Semitism. I find this beyond a certain logic, Javed Sahib, to be very frank. This is my personal opinion, I might be completely wrong, but relating anti-Semitism to what they have perpetrated themselves. I mean, these are two very different things. And why are you relegating one thing with the other, relating one thing to the other that have no point whatsoever, no connection?
The Israeli leadership always uses this anti-Semitism slogan to hide its misdeeds, to hide its atrocities committed against the Palestinians and other people, and they take refuge in that this is anti-Semitism, and anybody who is committed anti-Semitism, he is liable to be punished.
But that means, Javed Sahib, that you can do any kind of violence under the guise of this,
and under the guise of Semitism, and get away with it.
Exactly.
And this we have witnessed in the last 7 decades. The Israelis have committed heinous crimes against humanity, and they were able to get away with that. They have never been held responsible for that. There has never been an accountability. There has never been justice done in this matter.
There has never been any accountability, any justice as far as the Palestinian conflict is concerned. Ali Sarwar Naqvi, former ambassador, joins us online as well. Naqvi Sahib, thank you very much to have joined us. Naqvi Sahib, how do you view the decision by the ICC to pursue this case of the operation that happened in 2014? How much do you weigh the outcome of this decision?
You see, as they say, the sins of the past catch up with the present. The Israelis had launched a Gaza operation in 2014, which had resulted in massive deaths of Palestinians, and that is now under investigation by the International Criminal Court, because
All right, with the contact with Ali Savanakvi Saab was lost, but of course he was talking about all the atrocity that have been perpetrated by the Israeli authorities over the Palestinians. Let's go back to you, Javed Siddique Saab. As Ali Savanakvi Saab was also talking about the atrocities committed, and he said that that is biting them back, in fact. Do you feel that the impact is there, one way or the other, of this decision?
The very fact that the ICC has opened an investigation into all this is a very important development. That means this international entity is taking cognizance of the atrocities and the crimes committed by the Israeli forces. So I think this itself is an important development. What happens at ICC and what verdict comes out of it or what emerges from it is a different thing. But the very fact that someone has taken note of it and it has not gone unnoticed in a very long period of time is an important development.
All right.
So I think this is a very positive development. One must welcome it. Although the Israelis will definitely oppose it, so will
with all their might, and of course all the other countries that are also backing
also
them will
the United States of America, which is a great supporter and protector of Israel and has always come to the rescue.
And will always be, as per what we
Yes.
understand. Ali Savanakvi Saab joins us back online. Ali Saab, you were talking about the atrocities, the Operation Protective Edge of 2014 that is now having its repercussions back, I mean its reaction back on the Israelis. Could you tell us more on that?
Yes. You see, the International Criminal Court, when it was established in the 90s, last century, late last century, many countries accepted its jurisdiction, many countries did not. Israel did not, but the Palestinian National Authority, PNA, accepted its jurisdiction. And under that acceptance of the jurisdiction, the Palestinians have filed a suit against Israeli atrocities in 2014, and the court has admitted the case and has decided to launch its investigations. Now, this will expose to the world that the Israelis, as on many other occasions, but in this particular case, had waged atrocities against the unarmed, innocent Palestinian people by its military. You see, you never use the military against civilian population, but in Gaza, in Israeli-occupied territories of Palestinian lands, the Israelis used the military. So,
And this is an example that India has followed
this
with
is
what
a
it is
gross-
doing in India illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, in fact.
gross misdemeanor.
Exactly.
And-
We've also been, all right. Ali Savanakvi Saab, when you see this decision, you said it's going to have an impact, and of course it's going to expose Israel as far as what it has been perpetrating since decades on the Palestinian people will be finally put to light. Don't you feel the countries of the world already knew about that? I mean, what exposure are we talking about exactly?
Yeah, that's a good point you're making. But let me point out that in such situations, the very exposure, the proof of what atrocities were committed by a particular state is placing on record the high-handedness of the Israeli government, and that will not, of course, change anything in international law. You know there is no punitive action against any state which commits any irregularity. Like the International Court of Justice cannot take any punitive action. Similarly, the International Criminal Court cannot take any punitive action. But
So where is the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court in your point of view? To which extent can it go as far as this case is concerned?
basically, it is making the world aware of what's happened and placing on record the view of the international community that that particular state has committed many wrongs and has committed atrocities against unarmed population. So this also is important because like UN resolutions, this places on record the opinion of the international community, and to the extent that it creates the awareness about it, I think it serves a purpose. Of course, the International Criminal Court, as I said, cannot, even if it has jurisdiction over a particular state, cannot take any punitive action or punish that state in any manner. So,
could this decision, if any decision comes as far as the International Criminal Court is concerned, could this lead to an opening of further investigation or cases by other organizations whose result could impact Israel or the brutalities that it has committed?
yes, that is what will happen. Hopefully, that the ICC will find Israel as having done something wrong, as having violated the principles of international law, of the UN Charter, and that, I think, will place on record the wrongdoings of the Israeli government. Now,
All right.
the Israeli reaction is very, I find this very interesting because they see it as the worst example of anti-Semitism. Now, anti-Semitism is a big hoax of the Israeli people, government, because and everything that can be anything that is against their will or their wishes can be dubbed anti-Semitic. And I think the entire concept of anti-Semitism is very wrong and has no basis.
Flawed. I use the
morality.
word flawed, Alisa Vandakvi. Kindly stay online with us. Dr. Aqab Malik, expert foreign affairs, has also joined us online. Dr. Malik, thank you very much to have joined us as well. Dr. Malik, is the whole concept of anti-Semitism and the way it is used by the Israelis flawed? I'm talking about this in the whole context of the decision that has been taken by the International Criminal Court in order to go forward as far as the operation that happened, the Operation Protective Edge in 2014 by Israel is concerned.
I can't hear anything.
All right, there must be some kind of a technical glitch. Let's go back to our studios and Javed Siddique Saab. Javed Siddique Saab, we did talk about anti-Semitism. Do you feel the whole concept that has been, I mean, I'll throw the same question that I was trying to throw to Dr. Malik. Do you feel the whole concept of anti-Semitism has been misused, or the whole concept over the years has been used to such an extent that people now believe exactly every word of what Israel says as far as its process or concept of Semitism or anti-Semitism is concerned?
I think Israelis have used this as a ploy, as a tool to basically defend themselves and presenting to the world that they are a victim of anti-Semitism. And I don't think this is a just use of this anti-Semitism slogan. And I think they want people to be punished who criticize Israel or who are anti-Semitic, and they go to the courts and they start a trial against them. And many people in Europe have been punished for being anti-Semitism. So I think this is not fair. You cannot take refuge under this slogan by committing human rights violation, by perpetrating such heinous crimes against humanity, against innocent people, particularly in Palestine, and killing men, women, and children, and targeting them, and bombing them, and burning them, through the use of such weapons.
When they themselves have gone through this after the Second World
And
War,
why
I mean, they should understand. I mean,
Exactly.
no one better could understand the whole concept of human rights and human rights abuse.
The agony that they have gone through, and the torture they have suffered, and the arrest, they claim that Hitler,
Exactly.
did all this to them. After all this experience, they should have been more kind to the Palestinians. They should have
Exactly.
been more human.
Because, you know,
to
if I undergo a surgery or I have been injured,
Yes.
I understand an injured person much better.
So-
So I don't, this is where I don't understand the whole
No,
concept.
no, no. But the Israelis, what they have done to Palestinians is unprecedented in human history, and the way they have treated the innocent children, women, and old people. You know, they have not spared anyone. And you know, I think in the last 200 years, you know, we have not seen this kind of treatment of unarmed innocent people by a government, you know, armed with huge armed forces, using them against the Palestinian people, innocent people who are demanding their right of self-determination.
Exactly.
And this has been committed to them by the international community, by the United Nations. And I think the United Nations, it is the obligation of the United Nations to carry out all these commitments which were made to the
Exactly.
people of Palestine. Not
Exactly.
only that, the agreements that were concluded between Israel and the Palestinian leadership, Al-Fatah and Yasser Arafat and others, you know, these commitments should have been carried out. These agreements should have been carried out, but Israelis went back on them and they never carried out, they never, you know, they
Because it does not serve their interest,
Yes.
to be very frank, Javed Siddique Saab. Dr. Aqab Malik joins us back online. Dr. Malik, thank you very much to have joined us. I'd like to quote something that the Israeli foreign minister said. He said that his country will take every step necessary to protect its civilians and soldiers from legal persecution. And he also said that the probe could impact the stalled peace process. What's your take on that? First, on the quote about every step necessary will be taken to protect the citizens of Israel, and secondly, the stalled peace process. A peace process is already stalled. Where, what is he referring to exactly?
I can't hear anything.
Oh, all right. There must be still this issue. I'll revert the same question to Ali Sarwar Naqvi Saab. I hope you can hear me properly.
Umar, the point is that the Israelis will, of course, try to prevent any kind of prosecution of their officials or their people or their armed forces personnel. But the investigation will bring out, for the record, the actions that were illegal and inhuman actions in violation of the human rights of the people of Palestine. Now, there are two parts to the question of Palestine. There are two parts to the question of Kashmir. One is the human rights violations, the massive disregard of the human rights of the common people, and the territorial aspect or the political aspect. So, in Palestine, the political aspect, whatever it may be, will run its course through the international processes. But that does not mean that the Israelis should wage war against ordinary population, unarmed population, because that is a violation of the human rights, and not only a violation, but most inhuman behavior of a state which is only the hallmark of a most irresponsible and reckless state, which has no right to claim any favor for itself. So, I think the Israeli government will be fully exposed, and the Israeli officials who have been involved, and they're also military personnel, will be exposed under the International Criminal Court. Remember that the first International Criminal Court, without the name, was the Nuremberg Court, where the Nazis were prosecuted, and they were even sentenced. So, the International Criminal Court is a successor to that institution, and it can make a ruling. Recently, the International Criminal Court ruled against an African president, and the president was, censured by the international community. So these things are there, and these things should drive some sense into the Israelis that if this action is being taken by the International Criminal Court, then they are in the dock in front of the international community, and that is I think the important.
All right, let's also. I'd like your opinion also, and I'll then refer to our guest Javed Saab, who's in the studio. The Palestinian Authority has said, and I quote, "The crimes committed by leaders of the Israeli occupation against the Palestinian people are ongoing, systematic and widespread, and they make this investigation necessary and urgent." That was the Palestinian Foreign Minister, Mr. Al-Maliki, who said that in a statement following this decision by the ICC. Do you feel that the Palestinians' just right might take a turn for an outcome that could be more positive than we've seen in the past few years and decades?
So we should all hope so, but you know, Umar, having seen this and having been a practitioner of international diplomacy in my diplomatic career, I think global politics prevails over everything. And the global politics is that the Israelis are a favored blue-eyed boy of the Americans.
True.
And of the Western countries, even of European countries. I have served in Belgium, and I have served in Vienna. So I know that they have a special status in the eyes of those people. So the Israelis are treated with great indulgence by the big powers, and therefore they get away with all this. If it had been any other country,
well let's see, Ambassador Saab, whether they get away with it this time as well. Whether it be a ruling in principle, whether it be followed by any other action or any other ruling by any other international organization, only with time will tell. Thank you very much, Ali Sarwar Naqvi Saab, to have joined us and to have given us your very eminent opinion on this very important international topic that has been plaguing global politics since so many decades. Now, Javed Siddique Saab, coming back to you, were you surprised by the reaction of net price by the US State Department? Because I did talk about this in the very beginning of the show. I did quote what net price had to say. Any surprises there, despite the fact that he belongs to an administration that is that of Joe Biden's? Do you feel that Joe Biden, as far as the Palestinian issue is concerned, and to some extent also what the Kashmir issue is concerned, is following a certain policy that will or might not change?
I think they are following the policy which has been adhered to by the previous administrations on the question of Israel and the question of Palestine. You know, they have made it very clear. The Trump administration had gone a step forward and they had decided to shift their embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem.
Exactly, I remember
and that was a big shock for the Arab world. And surprisingly, now the Arab world is trying to shake hands and, you know, trying to build friendship with Israel under this. And this was an initiative by the Trump administration.
Exactly.
The Abraham Accord, we have seen it. But definitely, the greatest protector of Israel and its actions in Middle East is the United States of America.
Of course, I totally agree.
So I don't think that the Americans will do anything against their perpetual policy towards Israel, which is to protect the security of Israel.
How much do you agree or disagree with the statement of Ali Sarwar Naqvi Saab when he said that the ICC, although the ruling is very positive for the people of Palestine, but it does not hold any significant impact as far as decision making is concerned?
Of course, it cannot penalize Israel, but certainly if it admonishes Israeli forces or Israeli government that they have done something wrong, that they have committed a crime against innocent people there, the very remarks or very verdict that comes from the ICC has a great significance, and the Palestinians could use it at the diplomatic and political level to show to the world that they are being mistreated, that they are being subjected to a lot of torture, they are being subjected to human rights violations, and their only sin is that they are demanding their right of self-determination, which has been promised to them by the international community and specifically by the United Nations, and that's the crime they have committed. So they are being punished by the Israelis, their armed forces, and they are using all sorts of weapons. Target killings have been done of the Palestinian leadership. So this is very sad. But I think if the ICC comes out with some kind of verdict, some kind of judgment, or passes some comments about the conduct of Israel and its armed forces against the Palestinians, will have a significant impact and will have, I think it is going to provide Palestinian a, a ploy, or a Palestinian will be able to use that lever to basically highlight their case.
All right. Now, Javed Sahab, I would like to say a little word about Fatou Bensouda Sahiba as well, who is the ICC chief prosecutor. I would like to call her a woman of substance, because I'm sure that she must be under tremendous pressure by the US and by other powers that be, as far as this decision that the ICC has taken and other decisions that have preceded this one and others that will follow that one. How important is it for a person like Ma'am Bensouda to stay put in her place as far as important decisions such as this, whether they have an impact as far as action or not is concerned? But the fact remains that she has taken a very, very important, that even the United Nations hasn't taken in some time.
Of course, this is a very laudable step. If somebody is following the principle of justice, international law, international justice, she must be appreciated. And I think the ICC, the very fact that the ICC has decided to take up this case against the Israeli forces and the conduct of them and the killing of the Palestinians there in 2014. So this is itself is very important.
That it is definitely very important.
It sends a very strong message.
It sends a very strong message, and I totally agree with you on that. And I really would like to laud Madam Fatou Bensouda as far as this decision is concerned. And I'm sure there are going to be many other decisions that will follow suit after this. Now, Dr. Aqib Malik, expert foreign affairs, joins us online. Sir, firstly, can you hear us properly?
I can hear you if you talk slightly slower and louder.
Wonderful, wonderful, sir. I'd like to ask about another angle to all of this. We've talked in detail about the decision by the ICC, of course, as far as taking up the Operation Protective Edge and how the Israelis perpetrated the human rights abuses and killed 2,250 Palestinians in 2014 is concerned. There is another angle to it. We've talked about the US pressure, but there's also the European pressure, Dr. Saab, that have also urged action against Israel's de facto annexation of West Bank. This is also a decision that has recently come out in the open. Do you feel there is going to be a balance of power tussle between the European Union and the US as far as this decision by the ICC is also concerned?
Well, basically, you've got to understand the motivation behind the European Union is strictly based on the necessity to protect the rights of individuals around the world, and that's based in law and order and the International Criminal Court. The fact of the matter is the European Union is a signatory to this, and as a result, they will be upholding decision by the court. Now, that may cause angst between the United States and European Union, but the European Union is a different type of body altogether. You have to recognize that it now currently has 27 member states who agree with this policy. It's not just one body. It is a number of states who have accepted signatory status to the court. That may cause problems in the United States. But this is based on actual events, and the European Union has always been in support of finding out any criminal action anywhere in the world regarding abuse of humanitarian rights, individuals, genocide, and things like this. This is a basic essence of the European Union, without which it can't really exist. If it didn't have this essence and support these ideas, European Union would not exist as a body and an entity And
I agree
the
with you
whole
on that.
idea of the European Union in the first place was to coexist within Europe to reduce conflict. If it goes against that principle, then it would fracture itself, especially at a time when Britain, for example, has left the European Union.
True.
Which
So, of
has
course,
caused
Dr. Malik,
significant damage.
let's come back to the Palestinian issue. Let's come back to Operation Protective Edge and the decision that has been taken by the ICC. Do you feel that the ICC is under pressure?
The ICC will not be under pressure. How can it be under pressure? However,
Because of course, you know, you've seen the reactions that have emanated from Israel, from the United States, as far as this decision to go ahead with it is concerned. Do you feel that they are trying to exert? I'm not. Let me rephrase my question. Do you feel that the powers that be that do not want this decision to move forward as per the ICC ruling, do you feel that they will try to exert their maximum pressure? Because as per the statements that have emanated from either Benjamin Netanyahu or the Israeli Foreign Minister or Ned Price, it seems as if they will do their utmost in order to exert some kind of pressure on the ICC.
there's no doubt that the United States will exert a certain degree of pressure. But I think the ICC is very much aware of the fact that the U.S. was going to go against it. The Trump administration has been very pro-Israel in all aspects, irrespective of their actions on the ground against the Palestinians. So it was expected that, to an extent, the Biden administration would carry that forward. They're not going to turn that back in time. They're going to support their ally in whichever way they can. However, there's also a change of heart in the way that the Biden administration will view what's going on. But there's no doubt the United States is not a signatory, nor is China or Russia. So they plays a part because each of these countries has their own vested interest. And they do have issues, for example, the United States in Afghanistan, which is being investigated. They have their personal interest. Now, if they support the ICC in this respect, it would go against them as far as investigations in Afghanistan are concerned. So there's a bit of a conundrum and a dilemma for the United States and the Biden administration. So most likely than not that they will support Israel. They may dumb down or reduce the amount of verbiage or argument in support of Israel, yet they will still support them. I don't doubt that. However, you have to look at the objectives of the ICC here. The objectives of the ICC are to look anywhere in the world and find any atrocities on a large scale, like the Rohingyas and other peoples around the world, especially what they've been doing recently in the DRC, Angola, Uganda, and other places like this where there have been problems. They've upheld legal allegations, etc. They've targeted them, and they've been successful in that. But they're going to go further afield also. It's the protection of human rights that's more important here. And that also includes the Israelis as well as the Palestinians. It's not going to be skewed in one direction or another. For example, in 2018, when there were protests in Gaza, on the other side of the fence, the Israelis fired onto the protesters who were in Gaza and killed around 200. Oh, this is a complete violation of any humanitarian rights, complete violation of human rights of any people around the world. Imagine if that happened in any other country or more developed country in the world.
That would have come out had it been in any other country.
All the rights of any individual that is threatened in that respect.
I totally agree with you on that. Now, as far as the stalled peace process, between Israel and Palestine is concerned, do you feel this probe could have any impact whatsoever on the future of this peace process that is already stalled? Because the Israeli foreign minister has more or less quote unquote said that it could affect the stalled peace process. I'm talking of this probe.
I don't really think there's been a peace process in real terms. A peace process is about two parties or more negotiating a peaceful, mutual understanding. What has been happening hitherto during the Trump administration was it was only one party that was trying to get peace on their own terms. Now the Palestinians were fully against this. It needs to be party to the negotiations, without which there can never be a peace. Now the problem here is that, yes, the ICC ruling and any investigation. Now remember, this ruling is just about the prospect of having an investigation and it going through. It's not a decision. And as a result, the investigation will fail. It will face many obstacles in that respect.
Thank
it
you
will
very
have
much,
an
Dr.
impact.
Aqab Malik,
It will-
to have talked to us in detail about this aspect. And of course, it's a very important development as far as this probe into the 2014 operation against the Palestinians is concerned. Last question from you, Javed Siddique Sahab, and I've really probed you a lot as far as this very important issue is concerned. What message goes to the world as far as the beginning of this probe is concerned?
The message is that there is a problem unresolved, Palestinian problem. It's a soaring problem, and it has been left by the international community and the United Nations unresolved. And the world must, realize that this can explode, that the entire Middle East can be in flames at any moment of time. So therefore, this must be addressed. This issue must be addressed. For the last 70 years, it has been ignored.
Exactly.
And they have not paid any attention to it. Although the UN Security Council resolutions exist on this, but nothing has been done.
All right.
And that's the message.
All right. The message is loud and clear, ladies and gentlemen, as far as this probe into war crimes in Israeli held territories is concerned, the operation that happened in 2014. It will open the doors for many such operations that have happened in the past. It will also open the doors for many such disputes that still remain unresolved, like that in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. We wait, we watch, and we will observe this probe as it goes along, and we will update you as and when the results of this probe also come out. Till then, stay tuned right here to PTV World. Omar Khalid Butt bids you farewell.